You're over 40 and ready to get fit, but feeling the burn? Stick around. We have something for you today. Hey, I'm Mike,
And I'm Twain.
and welcome to another episode of 40 Plus Fit, the podcast that goes beyond the fads and delves into the science behind sustainable weight loss and fitness for the 40 plus crowd, where we bring you expert insights on exercise, nutrition, and healthy habits, empowering you to make informed choices and create a personalized plan for success. Because after all, life after 40 is just getting started.
Indeed, indeed.
All good today, Twain?
Very, very good. I actually rushed back from the gym because I end up going to the gym pretty late. So I'm just glad to make it back here on time. Yeah. And you know what it's like, right? Like today was late day, so um and I walked to the gym. And the worst part is on my walk back, there is an uphill.
So what you're really trying to say is the rushing was subjective.
It really was subjective. Like in my head, it was rushing, but honestly, if you looked at it from a third person perspective, it probably looked like just a slow crawling old man. But but I mean, okay, I joke, right? Like I'm not that old. Um, but look, like we are talking about rest today, right? Rest and why it matters over especially as you get older,
Yeah,
for all listeners that are over 40.
that's right. That's right. We always focus every time whenever we talk about like our weight loss journey or our fitness journey, we will always focus on the exercise, and then sometimes we'll obviously throw in the diet. But
Yep.
there's this third component to it that is just as important in my opinion. And it's very often the most overlooked component of it. And it is, as you stated, this concept of rest.
Yeah.
Perhaps maybe you could give some thoughts as to why rest really matters when for people over 40. Let's talk about this particular demographic today.
Yeah. I mean the reality as we get older, and I'm sure you experience this, I experience this as well, right? Is that we don't we don't seem to bounce back as robustly from the things that we do. And a lot of times it's like the workouts that we do, when we were 20s, when we were much younger. If we were to do it now, whereas previously we might be able to go in the next day and still smash another workout in the gym. Now I do one workout like that, and I think I might have, 2, 3 days before I can get back into the gym again to do something similar. So the rest is probably one of the most important things here to consider. As we age, the what's considered cell turnover actually kind of drops. And in very layman terms, it's basically how quickly your body rebuilds itself versus how much it is being torn down, right, and damaged in the normal course of the day. So all cells kind of undergo some sort of, damage in the day, and then it kind of gets repaired, and then eventually some cells die, some cells get replaced, and that's always continuously happening. When we talk about training and fitness, that's where the terms protein synthesis and then protein degradation kind of come in, and these two things are happening at the same time, and it's kind of a net effect, right? So when we are younger, and we have our protein synthesis in a very, very robust levels that exceed our protein degradation rate. So we have more build up than breakdown. And that's kind of what that early youth stage is, where we grow, and you ever seen a baby like bulk up like crazy, right, in the first year, and then they just continuously grow all the way until you're like 20. That's kind of where the synthesis rate is much higher. But then what happens around that age is, things start to level out, where the protein synthesis rate starts to get closer and closer towards the degradation rate. And so that cell turnover rate um, starts to get into the neutral zone. And then eventually, when we get into our more senior years, if we don't take care of things, it actually accelerates towards that negative zone, right? So repair slows down a lot with age. And this is literally I would say, the scientific definition of what aging is. Our body
Yeah.
is not able to repair itself as quickly. And so it breaks down, and then we start to experience some of these breakdown effects, right? So rest is super important in this sense, because when you have adequate rest, you're actually giving your body the best chance to rebuild itself. And if it can rebuild itself at the maximum rate, if you give it all the correct nutrients, you give it just enough stress, just enough signaling to, keep adapting, keep repairing itself, and then you give it ample time to recover. You're putting all the resources in place to create an environment where your body can really do its thing, and then you can sustain and maintain this vessel, right? This young and robust vessel as long as possible into the twilight years, so to speak.
Hmm. What about you mentioned the stress. How does the rest in the sense that you were speaking about here, does it play a
Hmm.
part in like stress reduction or hormonal balance?
Oh, for sure, for sure. There is a very fine balance between the amount of stress you need and the amount of recovery you need, right? And I think a lot of times people tend to underdo underdo the amount of recovery that they get. Of course, for most people in the modern world, I mean, whoever's listening to this is likely to be somebody that's, I reckon, will be suffering from some level of sleep deprivation. If you are working a corporate job, if you are in any ways a high earner in your particular industry, I reckon you are probably suffering from very, very poor sleep or very little sleep, even. So a large part of that aspect, the rest and the sleep aspect of things is what really kind of affects our body's metabolic function. Because then, because of the high stress levels, your body ends up overcompensating in certain ways. So when we get stressed, what happens is the cortisol levels start to rise up. Cortisol is great in a short-term situation where we require, heightened alertness, we require a heightened energy boost, we require, the need to be able to handle something tough and dangerous. If we go back to evolutionary biology, that comes in from that perspective of if you're facing a dangerous animal, you got to either run away or you got to fight, this kind of thing, right? And when your body is stressed, in the mind, when it's stressed, there's a neurochemical transformation where these cortisol levels go up. But the reality is that we aren't facing any real life or danger, life or death kind of deal, right? We are not facing a tiger. We're not facing something that's going to kill us right away. It's just extra workload because our boss told us we need to finish this project by 5 p.m. or something like this.
Hmm.
And so the issue for that is it's okay for the cortisol levels to rise, but if they don't come back down, then and they stay up high for long enough, what happens is it starts to mute other metabolic functions. And that's where people end up getting some sort of hormonal imbalance. Now, a lot of people think that hormonal imbalances, and this is a small side note, a lot of people think that hormonal imbalances are the reason why they can't lose weight, but it's more a function and an effect of other things. It's a side effect and a symptom of, the current state of their body versus an actual cause. So you don't actually address like the hormonal issues themselves, you address what's causing the hormonal issues. And more often than not, it's likely some combination of a high level of stress, not enough nourishment to the body in terms of nutrients, micronutrients, and of course, like we talked about, not enough physical stress to the body in the sense of putting it through its paces with exercise.
Hmm. You also touched on the point there is about going through the motions and taking a stress on the body. What
Hmm.
about with regards to injury? Because I know like last time you were saying is you're not a big believer in bad form causing most injuries, like what we always get taught by most people. That
Yeah,
if your form is incorrect, you're definitely going to get injured. But you also
yeah.
gave a statistic in previous podcasts where you spoke about how low the percentage of injury rate is in gym workouts compared to other workouts. But now,
Yes.
if you take into account this component, like let's say you go and you're resting, maybe you're not recovering, like like you mentioned in the beginning.
Hmm.
You go hit the hard legs today, and when you're younger, 2 days later
Yeah.
you can hit legs again. But now it's like you hit legs on Monday, and you're lucky if you can hit legs again on Thursday because your recovery is not as great. So
Yeah.
does this increase your likelihood of injury if you do not place emphasis on your rest and recovery?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a super, super good point and a great question in that sense, because it really is, interestingly enough, the main thing that people are slowly finding out is the cause for injury. A lot of times, injury comes about as an issue of fatigue management. And when we say fatigue management, it's just basically, when you exercise or when you have all these other stress accumulated in your life together with exercise, you have to recover from it. And if you are unable to recover from it and it accumulates to a high enough level, eventually something's going to give when you exercise, when you go back in for a workout again. And so the fatigue management part is actually what seems to cause a lot more injuries than, let's say, a particular form issue. Of course, notwithstanding, again, within reason, this is, of course, a nuanced kind of conversation, but
Yeah.
within reason, if your form is like within reason a decent form that you've been doing well and it's consistent from rep to rep the way you do it, you're not fundamentally changing the form as the set progresses. Like your first rep looks great, but then your last rep looks like shit because you're just trying to use other muscles to move the weight. Okay, that's
Yeah.
obviously a form breakdown. But let's say your form is consistent throughout. Maybe there's some looseness to it, maybe about 80%. You swing just slightly when you curl, in the last few reps, but you're still controlling the weight for the most part.
Mm.
Then it's really not going to be a form issue that's the case if you do get injured. A lot of times the injuries come about as a tolerance issue. Your body has reached that point where it's like, there's too much fatigue. I can't recover from it. And now you're subjecting me to more stimulus. It's like, dude, I'm at my limit. Boom, I'm done.
Yep.
And so a lot of times the answer to that is not, it's a very unsatisfying rest more, recover from it, and people don't like to do that. I talk to clients all the time where, they've been pushing really hard in the gym. I say, you know what? Based upon all the metrics that we've talked about, it seems like you've just been really pushing yourself like crazy in the gym. And the answer to this is to actually take your foot off the pedal a little bit. You gotta cruise a little bit to let your body compensate and recover from what you've been subjecting it to.
Mm.
And when people eventually get convinced of that and they try it out, I can tell you, like, a lot of times I get guys telling me, "Oh man, I'm suddenly making so much more gains. I'm suddenly so much stronger in the gym after 2 weeks of just like taking it easy." We drop the volume. I tell them to drop the level of intensity that they push at, the weights that they push at. Just trying to take it down maybe 10% or so. And just give your body a break, give it a chance to actually recover from what you're subjecting it to.
Mm. I
Yeah.
experienced a very similar thing as well. As at one time, because when you read online, they're always talking about you must increase your sets for better
Hmm.
hypertrophy so that you can get better results and da 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 da.
Yep.
But because of that, I got all caught up in the hysteria and I started working out 6 days a week. So by
Yeah.
6 days a week, I don't mean like including a cardio here or there with like rest and recovery days, but it was
Yep.
just 6 days in the gym working, right?
Yeah.
And I couldn't understand like why am I not seeing, why am I not looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger already? Because I'm hitting 6 days a week, probably like about 25 to 30 sets per week per muscle group. I'm like, come on, what's going on?
Yeah.
And so I think I was through a discussion, just like a side discussion with you. And I was like, a bit of an aha moment came where it's like, hey, maybe I'm just doing too much for now. And so
Yeah.
I scaled back and I scaled from 6 workouts a week down to 2 workouts a week.
Yeah.
But in those 2 workouts, I pushed quite hard, right? But then for the rest, I only did rest and recovery. We'll share a bit later about what is recovery in our sense.
Yeah.
But focused on that and I started seeing better results. And then from seeing the better results from the 2 workouts, I started then as I got more into it and more my body adapted to this. Then I added, okay, I went to 3 workouts a week. And then
Mm.
from 3 workouts, I went to 4 and I've stayed at 4 with an added cardio day. So total, it's 5 days a week really that I'm working out these days with 2 days designated rest.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing that like this is working like you've said before, everything is tailored to people, right? Every person
Yeah.
is different. And I find for myself, this is the one that works best is the 5 day workout. Well, 4 days in the gym and 1 day cardio. So
Yeah.
with that,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But
I
with
think finding
yeah,
your sorry. I think like finding your sweet spot, like that's the most important thing. Like that's something that we cannot really substitute. For everybody, like finding your
mm,
sweet spot is really something that is a bit more personal and individual to your lifestyle. And a large part of it is like your stress level as well. What's your lifestyle stress like? If you come from a very high stress kind of environment, maybe doing less in the gym is probably better
mm,
because you're already coming into it with a higher level of fatigue drop off, right? Just a contribution from lifestyle stress. But let's say if you yourself are potentially a very anxious person, you're high strung and you're very anxious, and that's just the kind of like your natural personality, then that might add another layer of extra stress that, you actually have to recover from as well. And this is why we always try to figure out, like, for individuals, okay, based on your personality, based upon the way that you look at things and the way that your life is kind of organized, like what would the best split look like for you? What should you actually be focusing on? Because a lot of times people end up like, worrying about all the small little minute stuff that the trade-off becomes you end up over stressing on it. So now you cause a lot more stress. And then the benefit from like stressing about the thing actually doesn't give you very much. So you're net negative, So it really is the balance in the game of trade-offs and finding your individual kind of setup.
Yeah.
And it changes, right? Like there's sometimes in your life where like things get a little bit more hectic and you need to accommodate that. And then sometimes in your life things get a little bit more chill and you're like, hey, you know what? I have a bit more time. I think I can push things a bit more.
Yeah.
And life is never linear in that sense. I mean, it should look fairly linear when we zoom out and say like, okay, year on year, I do generally see like a progression upwards. I'm improving in some way or some form. But in the day-to-day, obviously, it looks like, sometimes it's periods of like massive growth, and then sometimes it's just maintenance for a while. Sometimes fitness takes a little bit of a backseat. You can't be at peak fitness all the while, just because other things happen. Yeah.
Mm. I find that it does require a certain element of re-education because growing up, as
Hmm.
we also taught a lot of like go big or go home. If you go to the gym, you must
Yeah.
give 150%, all these kind of things. So I agree with the fact that when you are at the gym, you give 100%. There's no doubt about that. But
Yeah.
it's what happens like, okay, what happens when I leave the gym and what happens the next day after the gym and so on and so on.
Yeah.
What do we actually do? And that's the part that I required the so-called re-education on this and to place recovery as a priority. So I'm not like advocating for people that are working out that 2 days a week is the best way to go. But what I'm highlighting here is that actually I didn't listen to my body as I was going forward. And I didn't take note that my body was stagnating because I had too much, as you're saying, stress in work as well as on the workout. And so tailoring back to 2 workouts a day just helped my body adapt to my new environment and my new stage of life that I'm actually at compared to when I was working out in my 20s. And so
For sure.
because of that realignment that way, that then my body was able to adapt to this, and then I could build upon it. And that's how you work your way back up to how many days your body requires.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if we can use that and we move into the next one, is like when I speak to people, and I tell them, okay, what is your rest days like? There's a very general sense that the rest day is one of two things. One, it's either sleep, or
Mm.
two, it's I lie on my couch, do nothing, and just watch TV. But that's not
Yeah.
exactly true of rest and recovery days, right? Perhaps you can share some insight. What is recovery?
Yeah. I think okay, I think to answer this question, we probably want to look back at this component here we're talking about with regards to recovery, right? And simplify a bit further into categories so it's easier to understand how you and whoever's listening to this, right, how you could actually apply it to your life. Because the reality is that for some people, they might need a lot more sleep and a lot more sitting on the couch horizontally. Like for some people, that's the case. For some people, they might not need as much. They might actually need more like different types of recovery. So when we talk about recovery, I like to actually look at recovery as the blanket umbrella term for anything that helps you reduce fatigue.
Okay.
Okay. And then under this umbrella term of recovery, there's actually the rest, and then there's this other part, the recharge component. So there's rest and recharge. And so these are two different things. Rest is giving your body ample time to actually go about its repair functions. So rest is like what you mentioned, where most of us think about recovery, we immediately think rest, sleep, and a lot more of these like just sitting on the couch and just relaxing, right? Like not moving, very, very, very passive stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in terms of the other component to recovery, that's the recharging component. Recharging is meant to help you with, I would say, improving your capacity to recover better over time. So what that means is like you do these activities, it generally helps you strengthen your ability to recover so that during your rest time, you actually recover even more, right? It improves the environment of recovery further. Whereas rest is just being in the environment for a long enough time, right? The quantity of the quantity of the recovery versus the
Mm.
quality of the recovery, so to speak. And so when we talk about this, like recharging components, or some people might term it as active recovery, things like this, we have stuff like gentle walks,
Yeah.
so low intensity, just clocking your steps, going out, being out in the sunshine, breathing in some, fresh air. That's really, really good for recharging. The other part is things like yoga, very low intensity work. Of course, yoga, when I say low intensity, I don't mean like go into what's that, Bikram yoga or hot yoga and stuff like that. Honestly, those will dehydrate your system and make you even more stressed, right? And then some of them are like power yoga. It's honestly a workout in and of itself to some degree. I'm talking about very gentle stretching, very kind of the purpose of doing it is to help regulate the nervous system, calm you down, right? Regulate that like parasympathetic part of the nervous system to help you feel, push the recovery even better. There's other things that I think might qualify as passive recovery to some, but I actually look at it as still relatively active recovery, meaning um, reading, doing meditation. I still view this as somewhat of an active recovery, a recharge kind of deal. Because and in a recharge process, you're always doing something that helps improve your capacity to recover. And so things like reading, things like meditation, all these are actually relating to putting your mind into a very, what's the term for this? Like into a very mindful and relatively focused state. And I think this is just as important in terms of overall wellness and just physical well-being, right? Because if you mental wellness and physical wellness like tie in so closely to each other, that doing these things can actually enhance your ability to focus better, even in your workouts, even in in the gym performance, in your own sporting performance, things like this as well. Yeah. So that's kind of how I look at recovery, and I explain it to a lot of the clients, which is recovery is the blanket term, but there's two components to it, and both are necessary. You know, I think that the tricky part for a lot of people nowadays, especially for many of you that are listening to this, is going to be I'm pretty sure many of you have already have this immediate thought, which is, I don't have time to do all these things, right? And the reality is, yeah, everybody has the same 24 hours, and I'm sure you've heard people tell you this right before. Oh, I have the same 24 hours, but everybody's background and their situation is so different. Like a mother who has, three kids to deal with, maybe one of them is a toddler, maybe two of them are teenagers, she has work, career to deal with. She also has to be a part, like, be a wife to a husband,
Yep.
things like this, and then dealing with the household, things like that. Like you have a lot on your plate, it can feel super overwhelming. So I would say doing your best with like, okay, what are the key recovery things that you can do to help you will be the most important thing. And like sleep is probably one of the most important ones. It's like how much sleep can you try to maximize and get? There is definitely a conversation to be had there. For a lot of people, they tend to do this thing called revenge bedtime procrastination. So they're lying in bed and they're using their phone, scrolling through Reddit, doom scrolling through Instagram and things like this. Obviously, the social media apps are designed to engage our attention, but also we tend to do this, and this is actually a relatively new phenomenon, believe it or not, right? And they have a term for it. This was by Chinese researchers. They term it as revenge bedtime procrastination, and we do it because we want to feel in control of our day. When you are overwhelmed with so many things on your plate, like I just mentioned, the mom that's like, having to take care of kids, having to take care of house, having to take care of their career and all that sort of stuff, they are so overwhelmed that to them, they don't have any control over any of these things. They're always being pulled, right? There's nothing there that they're doing that to them, it's, I want to do it. It's like, I have to do it. And so when you finally get time, even though it's to your detriment, we start to go into that realm of like, oh, I can take control in some way or some form. So I'm going to do this. Yeah. So I think it's just like being honest with yourself and saying, okay, I might need to give up some of these things, or I might need to have like a strategy in place for me to be able to get a bit more sleep, first, right? Start with that. And then once I can do that, I actually can become more productive on all these other areas that I can slowly expose small little pockets of time and mentally reframe myself to let go of certain things that I otherwise could not let go of. Yeah. So so that's my little breakdown of recovery beyond doing more than sleep.
You touched on using yoga as a recovery. But I find for
Yep.
myself is like with some of the positions that you have to get yourself into, that alone is a big workout in itself.
For
Getting
sure. For
into the
sure.
position, never mind holding the position or anything like that, but oh my goodness. But
Yeah.
for the sleep, we do have an episode coming up that's going to be targeted specifically towards the concept of sleep and all that kind of
Mm.
stuff. We're going to expand more upon that. So for those listeners that are interested about that, do stay tuned and look out for that episode coming in the next few weeks.
Yep. The easiest
Uh,
way to do that is just make sure you subscribe to the podcast,
yeah, just become
right?
a subscriber or a
And
follower.
get a
I don't know what they
notification
call
when
it
it
on
comes
this,
out.
but yeah, one of the things. So very good call there. The other part that I wanted to also just touch on is when you were talking about all these different kinds of things, with the walks, the yoga, reading,
The reading,
meditation.
meditation, yeah.
There's also the other part is that I'm not sure if it's still a big thing now, but it was a couple of years ago. Is the concept of foam rolling, stretching and
Oh
foam
yeah.
rolling. How
Yeah.
does that play a part in recovery?
Uh I think that falls under the umbrella of what we would term as um touch, compassionate touch. No, compassionate touch is more like massage. Well, these self-massage techniques, I think the idea here is that when you do this kind of like rolling and stuff, it's quite supposed to release the muscles or remove knots and things like this.
Mm.
With the current research, we know that's not true because to fundamentally change the tissues, you actually have to express a lot of force, more than you can do with a foam roller, more than people can apply with their hands. So really, but this doesn't mean that it doesn't invalidate the technique, right? Like it doesn't invalidate foam rolling or going for sports massage or any of these things because people do still feel good from going to it. And there are some other ways and reasons why it feels good, so I do think these things have their benefit. Like if you have a regular masseuse you go to, and after you go to them, you feel really light and you feel great after that. That's a benefit. You're getting something out of it too. Is it
Yeah.
fundamentally changing your muscles or anything? Probably not. If it makes you feel better and then thus you can perform better in the gym and you get more performance out of that, then your body changes from that, then sure, it's just one step, one cog in this machine towards like improving your body. Um, I would say though that personally I don't do any of these things, mainly because like I don't have the time for it, and also I find it boring to be honest. If anything, usually I just get like my wife to massage me or something. And usually it's like, let's say if my lower back is stiff or something, I'll just lie down on the ground while we're watching TV and she'll just step on my back. Like that. That's what I get her to do. So
It's the
yeah.
benefits of having a small Asian wife, is it?
Pretty much, pretty much. Yeah. So it's one of those things where if you have the time for it, go ahead. And if you do it and you feel good from it, continue. Like don't let the research, so to speak, like stop you from doing it.
Yeah.
But if you're doing too much, like here's the thing, right? I think pendulums always swing in one opposite direction, like extreme directions, right? And the truth is they usually are somewhere in the middle or a little bit more geared towards one or two of the ends. But I've seen cases where people go into the gym and they foam roll for like 30 minutes on the floor. And then after they do another like 30 minutes of activation drills and stuff like that. So they spend one whole hour in the gym doing all that just to start working out. And that's crazy. Like to me, that's crazy
Who
because
has
like
the time?
yeah, number one, who has the time, right? And then number two, like you if you need to do all that just to prepare yourself to train, you probably have a lot more issues that need to be solved in terms of like physically, right? Like if you really truly needed that. And yeah, and so I think a lot of that is just like yeah, it's just people misunderstanding like what's necessary and what's not, what's absolutely vital with regards to this kind of stuff. Yeah, because everybody's scared to get injured. Totally understand that.
Yeah.
But the truth is that your body's pretty robust, and the only way you can get injured if you push yourself beyond what your body is actually capable of, you know. Yeah. So that's my take on the foam rolling stuff. But I don't know. How about you, Mike? Like, what's your experience with it? Do you like
With
it? Do you not?
foam rolling?
I mean, foam
Foam
rolling or
rolling, I don't find it as light and boring as you do. Likely because I'm probably not as flexible as you are. So when you're actually doing the rolling, sometimes it can be quite painful.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely,
and getting into
definitely.
the positions in order to actually roll, just like the yoga one, getting into the position is like a workout on itself.
Yeah.
But whether or not I feel that it gives me a fantastic recovery, I'm not sure. I'm not sure because I have nothing to compare it against. Like if I had just rested instead of doing the foam rolling as well. And
Mm.
I don't have any metrics really to measure it by. But if you go by feeling,
Yeah.
um, I would say is that if I just sat and watched TV all day, I probably would have got the same kind of recovery.
Okay. Yeah, I mean
I
that's fair.
feel this is a
Sure.
feeling, right? There is no
Yeah.
real metrics on this one.
Yeah. I mean, as
But
much as there's research on all these kind of stuff, at the end of the day, look, like the individual experience still matters as well. So it's like kind of best guess and highest probable guess from the research is this. But what's your experience with it? And again, if there's no real big trade-off being made, I don't see any issue with it.
yeah,
But if let's say you're doing all this foam rolling stuff and you take it too far, right? Like you end up just only foam rolling for the majority of the week and you're not really exercising much. And it's not like you need to take the time off, like I mentioned earlier in the episode, where I have guys that, for 10 weeks they're just smashing themselves into death in the gym, right? Yeah, then maybe you just need to train more. Maybe you just need to exercise more, maybe you just need to move more. So it does come down a lot to looking at the individual's kind of
mm,
regime, I guess, and also what the goal is, right? End of the day,
yeah.
what's the goal? You
I
know?
find like for myself is like the reason why I would use foam rolling still is I use it for flexibility. Because as a
Hmm.
person who's naturally very stiff, like super stiff, I need to use the tool in order to get into to do the various exercises to improve flexibility. Now,
Oh,
can I do it without the foam roller? Most likely I can, but I use the tool, the foam roller as the tool to do so, to actually do these kind of
hmm.
workouts. So I just, similar to you, is just do it in front of the TV while you're watching
Oh.
something.
Wait, so
I
sorry.
don't use it as a warm up or anything like that.
Oh, okay, okay. So yeah, I was
Mm.
just gonna ask, do you do it like, are you saying you're doing it like before you do the workouts,
No,
or are
no,
you
not
doing
at
it
all.
as like
Again,
a passive thing where you're just lying on it, trying to just reach back and
yeah,
stuff like.
more like that. Because
Okay.
I've gone
Yeah.
for enough Thai massages where I don't know if you've been for one where they do the end part where they lift you up and try
Yeah.
crack your back.
Yeah.
And all I can hear is the ladies always like and trying to pull me because I'm just so stiff. I'm like a wooden plank that the person is trying
Yeah.
to bend. And to this day, none of them have successfully been able to do it. So I was joking with my wife
Wait,
about,
wait, wait, wait. I reckon that maybe you got like a really small masseuse, and I mean you're a big guy, right? Like you're 90-ish kilos. So if you got a small masseuse, how is she going to really manipulate you, you know?
but I've gone through many already.
Oh, I see.
And we usually go for the couple massages. So my wife also gets to giggle at this as you see the different ones where he's trying to pull me. So I joked with her a while back and I said, oh, okay, one day we're going to get this right. So one of the things now we do is use a foam roller to try and roll it out and see if I can build up any
Yeah,
flexibility in there.
for
But
sure, for sure.
the final component when it comes to recovery is also how does, or not how does, but does nutrition and hydration also play a part?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I mean, those are definitely two very important things. Like with nutrition, I think the key thing we've talked about is many, many, many times, but it bears repeating. Protein, right? Like making sure you get enough protein is super important. If you are not trying to lose like a ton of weight, making sure you get enough calories is very important as well. Even if you're trying to lose weight, making sure that you get the right amount of calories so that you're in a deficit, but you're not, you know, so grossly in a deficit that like you can't recover properly is also important. So that's the nutrition component, right? Like making sure you get the protein in, making sure you get the total number of calories that you need for your goals. And then of course the micronutrient parts that I mentioned, I think I briefly mentioned earlier as well. Making sure like is the quality of the food that you're eating um highly nutritious, aside from just like having carbs or fats in it, what other nutrients do they have? What other vitamins, minerals do they have? And that's usually where you want to default to all the whole foods and things like this just to make sure you're getting that whole array of nutrition in to help with recovery. The other part about hydration as well is super important. One common thing with clients I notice is actually a lot of them don't drink enough water.
Hmm.
And I suspect maybe if you're sitting in front of the computer all day, you might not realize you are losing water as easily as, let's say, if you were to be walking around outside or being active throughout the whole day, moving around, outside. That will feel a lot more obvious to you that you're losing water, and you're more likely to drink more water that way, right? But a lot of times, just sitting in front of the computer, you might just be, losing a lot more water just through your breathing, which happens continuously. And so a large part of recovery is just making sure you're well hydrated. If you're not hydrated enough, there's not enough water in your body, of which, again, like how much, like what's the percentage of which we are composed of water, right? It's like what, 60 something percent, 67%, something
Yeah.
of that nature. So water is that medium and vessel through which a lot of these specific nutrients and minerals that we talked about are kind of like being transported. So you need enough water in order for these metabolic functions to kind of go about their regular business. And the other thing about it is there is a difference between drinking enough water to not be dehydrated, or just, a survivable amount of water, versus drinking the optimal amount of water to really ensure that all the metabolic functions can function well. Okay, the former is the easiest way I can explain this is the former is more like you drink only when you feel thirsty.
Hmm.
Like, sure, you're not going to die, you know, you're going to be at a very survivable level of
That's a that,
hydration.
that's a good
But
motivation.
yeah, yeah, you know what I mean? Like, you're going to be at a very survivable level of hydration, but inside you, all the metabolic functions that we want to be working to help you with muscle repair, fat loss, energy utilization, and all these other good repair functions that we want going, they won't be able to do their job very well, because you're not supplying enough water in. So this one, I'm sure many people want to get would like a recommendation, right? I usually recommend something like 40 mils per kilo. So for every kilo that you weigh, you probably want to drink about 40 mils of water. Okay. Now, there's usually an upper end of like 3.5 to 4 liters for most people. I don't think most people, the average person, if you're not like super active, you're not running, you're not like doing gym every day or some sort of exercise every day where you're running or you're going to the gym or whatever, and you're not sweating a lot, you probably don't need very much more between like 3.5 to 4 liters. Okay, but that can vary depending on the person. I've had clients where for them, because they're so active and they just lose a lot of water really easily, for them they need like 5.5. I've had clients where for them 2 liters is enough. That's good enough. Yeah. So it really depends on the individual, but I think the sweet spot for a lot of people is around that 2 to 3 liter range. If you're within that range, you are probably good. You can try drinking more than that, up to about 4 liters, and just do it for a week. I think I sent out an email once about water hydration, and there's this little like water challenge that I gave people to do, where they end up drinking, like a bit more than what they're used to. And what you find is that a lot of the symptoms that they are facing, bloating, water retention, things like this, all this start to disappear. They drop like maybe a kilo or 2 kilos over the week just from drinking extra water.
Ooh.
And if that's like that could easily happen to you as well, especially if you haven't been drinking too much water as well.
I suppose the water intake recommendation also depends on where you're from. Like if you're in Southeast
Mm.
Asia, where it's very hot, it's very humid,
Oh
you're
yeah,
obviously going to expend more and need more water compared to, say, someone who's in Switzerland, um,
yeah,
d- who's not necessarily going to be sweating as much as what you would in a humid country like in Southeast Asia.
yeah.
So I suppose
Which,
that also
which,
plays a
which,
part.
yeah. Which speaking of which, I think at this moment where we are recording this, Southeast Asia is kind of going through a bit of a heat wave, isn't it?
Yeah,
I
crazy
was
one.
just I was just in Singapore a couple of weeks back as well. And every time I go back to Singapore, it's good you brought this up because every time I go back from Sydney to Singapore,
Hmm.
I notice like I definitely have to drink more water when I get back to Singapore. Like I drink at least 1.5 liters more than I usually do. Otherwise, I get dehydration headaches.
Oh,
Yeah. The
interesting.
first few times I went back to Singapore from Sydney, I I always ended up like feeling a bit more lethargic, feeling like, having this mild
Hmm.
dehydration headache. just kind of going on. And yeah, I realized it was just because I was sweating so much more.
I thought it's just because you're missing the wife.
I mean that's the reason that I give her, but don't tell her that. But it really is just the dehydration and the water issues.
All right, the final one I just want to touch on this hydration here before we move on to the next section. It's just there's also what type of water are you taking in? Like there's this, let's call it three camps here. There's obviously going to be more, but let's call it three camps. There's the I only drink water, plain water. That's all I drink.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then there's the next camp who says, no, water, like just water is not enough because you're losing salt when you're sweating. So you need to replace that with an electrolyte drink, all right?
Uh,
Some kind of
yeah.
sports drink, all right? So whether that's Gatorade or whatever it is, your choices, that's your drink because you need to replenish all of that.
Okay.
And then there's also this third camp. They come out and they say, actually, you need more than water, but you shouldn't go for something synthetic. I use synthetic here in inverted commas as a
Yeah.
sports drink. You should just still stay natural and drink something like coconut water. What are your
Oh.
thoughts on?
Hmm. I think a lot of times the hydration issue itself is important in terms of just getting in enough water, right? At the baseline level, you probably would do okay just drinking more water and eating whatever you're eating currently. Because most of the time, people will get enough electrolytes in that sense coming in from just a regular array of foods that they're having. So what we're looking for is generally like, okay, you want to make sure your sodium, your potassiums, right? Extra magnesium, minerals as well will be helpful in that regard. But most of the time when you are sweating too much, we end up losing, I think a large part of it is just the sodium, which is easily replenished, right? Just salt your food a little bit more, and that's it. Whether or not you need to take Gatorade, whether or not you need to take coconut water, I think the argument of like, oh, synthetic versus natural is a fallacy in and of itself already. We probably don't want to go too much into that, but just understand that just because something is so-called natural does not make it better. Just because something is synthetic does not make it worse. Okay. So like we will leave it at that. But and if you have any questions on that, just feel free to ask. But between like whether you should take more Gatorade, whether you should take more coconut water, I think you should also remember this as well. When you take in Gatorade or you take in coconut water, there's still additional macronutrients that come in with that as well, right? So for coconut water and Gatorade, they both have, I guess, additional carbs coming in. And so, you kind of count that towards your macro total and everything. But when you take in extra carbs, you have to remember that your hydration levels also tend to go up a bit more because carbs in and of themselves are a bit more what we call water-philic, right? Hydrophilic. And so they absorb more water. So 1 gram of carbs absorbs like, or glycogen, 1 gram of glycogen is like 3 grams of water. So if you are drinking more of drinking more of these drinks, you probably want to make sure that you're also getting in a commensurate amount of like water, at least 50% more water in that sense, just to balance it out a little bit more. So the issue of hydration is its own thing. The issue of like electrolyte replenishment is also its own thing. And you can put the two together. And yeah, if you want to drink more, if you want to be more hydrated, I would say just focus on drinking more water first. For the average person, just focus on drinking more water first. And then if you find that even though you're drinking a lot more water, you're still not feeling great, you're still feeling a bit lethargic, you're not getting great pumps in the gym and things like this, then just start salting your food a little bit more. Or you can alternatively maybe drink like a Gatorade or something when you're training, and you should be good enough. It should not be anything more complicated than that.
There's a reason I asked this specific question like this is that
Uh-huh.
recently I actually read an article, a journal article from a
Yeah.
study in, I think it was 2012. I'm sure there might have been something done since then, but I'm just going to refer to this one in 2012.
Yeah.
And so they actually compared these three amongst test subjects that actually consumed them and then did various levels of exercise and
Mm.
then took the metrics thereafter. And the interesting part of it all was that at the end of the day, they all came out more or less equal. One was not far superior than the other. If anything, there was only like two or three points up or
Like
down
not a
between them.
statistical significance,
Nothing
right?
substantial enough to say, okay, if you want to be, um, what is it, hydrated, you must take a Gatorade or you must take coconut water. Actually, regular water was good enough. But from a personal perspective, I've also found that, nowadays is we all going on this health trip. And so one of the things that we do is we always buy these water filters. And so previously I had this water filter that had, I think it was 7 different filtration processes that it goes through
Okay.
before it actually gives you the water. So by the end of the day, all you're drinking is something wet because all your minerals and everything has been
Yeah.
taken out through this whole filtration process. And
Yeah.
the thing I could never understand was I drank, as you say, about 4 liters per day, right? Excuse me. I drank about 4 liters per day, but I always found myself thirsty. And I could
Mm.
never understand what is going on here. It's like, this is just crazy. And so I did a bit of research into this, and they were saying is like, there's the minerals in the water is actually what helps to quench the thirst. It's not the wetness of the water, but the minerals in the water. So I said, I spoke to my wife and I said, why don't we try this out? Let's change our super water filter for a lower spec model that's not as high filtration. And we took this, and so I think this one only has 3 filtration compared to the 7 of the previous one. And since we've been drinking this one now, I don't experience that thirstiness anymore. I'm actually now being able to quench the thirst. Because prior
Yeah.
to that, you watch K-dramas and you see like the zombie shows. One of
Uh-huh.
the first signs that they are becoming zombies is they have this excessive thirst. So I was a bit worried. Let's first test this out and make sure we're not turning into zombies here.
Oh, yeah. I think that's definitely valid. A lot of the minerals that potentially would be in, the water is something that our body definitely could use. I do think the filtration systems matter a lot more in places where potentially the water might not be as potable. What you want to be filtering out is not so much the minerals themselves, but more of the bacterial elements and
Yeah,
all these other unnecessary ish, contaminants, right, to the water.
that's right.
Yeah,
So
but
my
some,
take,
I mean, some
yeah,
level of mineral is super important, right? Like you do need some of those in there.
right. So my takeaway from that is that don't fall into the hype when buying water filters as well, where you get
Yeah.
like 7 to 12 different filtration processes. As long as you get the basic filtering, it's good enough already.
It's one of those things, right? It's like more is not necessarily better. At
Yes,
some
yes,
point, at,
exactly.
at some point, the curve starts to dip downwards again once you get past a certain point. So, better is better. And what is exactly good for you in your current circumstance might differ from somebody else.
Yep,
Like for myself, because I sweat a lot, because I train a lot, my level of sodium intake is quite high. Like I need that level of sodium intake. But
yep,
all my markers, everything's great. Blood pressure, everything's fine. Whereas for somebody like my mom, for example, her blood pressure is naturally like quite high, so she needs to take medication to kind of bring it down. And then one's more of a genetic thing, but she's not as active as I am, or she's not, doing all that as well. So she does need to watch the sodium a little bit. So it depends on the individual, right? Like
yeah,
you have to see the context.
yeah. All right. So this is the part that I touched on earlier is the concept of listening to your body.
Hmm.
Now, listening to your body is also obviously, I don't know, can be seen as a bit of a hippie term, I suppose. But when we're talking about listening to your body, is actually understanding the different kinds of pains that you get,
Yeah, I think
um,
that would be a great way to
and
put it.
and so on, so that like, okay, this particular pain is a good pain. Like this is if I'm going to the gym, I am going to experience some pain, and this is the good pain that I want to experience from doing this particular exercise.
Yeah.
But then there are also the other kinds of pains, right? Perhaps you can just share a bit on that.
Yeah. Um, I guess when you say good pain, we're not really talking about pain per se, because okay, pain is so subjective, right? But we can all probably agree that when we go and train and you feel like after that, when you touch your muscles, they have that soreness to them, the intense soreness, especially the first time you train after a long while. right? If you haven't gone to gym for a while and then you go and train, suddenly your muscles, your biceps or whatever muscle you train, right? Suddenly it's feeling super sore. That's probably a good level of soreness in the sense that, or that's the good pain that we're looking at and
Yeah.
that we want to wholeheartedly embrace to some degree. But of course, a quick caveat here, if you're like consistently sore, the soreness is so intense, you can, like on your quads or your glutes or whatever, you can barely sit down or stand up off the toilet, then maybe you might have overdone things a little bit. Yeah.
But
Just
I feel like
maybe.
that every time I start a squat program, I always feel like that for at least the first week.
For at least the first week. But I think that's a good point that you brought up as well, because a lot of times what happens is once your body gets more conditioned to it, to the whole exercise process and the frequency of the exercise, you don't actually get that same intensity of soreness anymore. In fact, sometimes I get clients or even like beginners or people just talking to me like, hey, you know what? I actually don't get sore from my workouts currently. I say like at all. And they say, yeah, just a little bit, but like it's not the same as when I first started. When I first started, it was super sore and it felt like, oh man, I could barely move my arms, I could barely sit down on the toilet, but I don't get that anymore. Am I doing something wrong? Am I not making progress anymore? And the thing is, it doesn't mean that, okay? So if you're worried that you're not getting soreness and all, don't worry, it doesn't mean that. You should just be looking at like, okay, is your performance going up in the gym? Are you lifting heavier weights? Do you feel your muscles better? Things like this. If you're doing that, and you get a good pump, your performance is improving session to session, you're probably all right. You get a bit of soreness, it's totally fine, totally normal. Yeah, you're not trying to get as much soreness as possible. No one wins a soreness trophy for that. So soreness is good, we established that, but the potential kind of pain that might not be good is one where it's acute. Okay, so it's very sharp. It doesn't feel, it comes about like suddenly. And a lot of times these kind of pains, they happen because like, again, like we talked about, poor fatigue management, and either certain parts of the tissue structures just give way, right? When you're doing the exercise. Yeah. So that kind of pain where it's acute, and it's sharp and it feels like something is damaged, that is something that you want to be a bit more mindful of. Now, how do you actually go about it? Well, first of all, if it's a sharp pain, and let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like unbearable, and then 1 being like, nothing at all. If it's anything more than a 5, you probably want to get that checked out. Okay. If it's something less than a 5, then probably it might not be necessarily be like something very serious. But you want to then identify after that, after you identify the intensity, you want to identify like what are the things that you do that aggravate it. So let's say if you do the same exercise again and you find that as I do the exercise, there's the actual pain and it is getting worse, then probably you want to not do the exercise. Yeah. But let's say if you try with a lighter weight and you do that same exercise and you can feel some of that pain, but it's not getting any worse. And sometimes what you might find is that it might even dull off a little bit, it might go down a little bit. Then that's actually maybe an indication that you're still okay to do the exercise. You just might need to lighten the load on that, how to manage around it. So when there's any kind of like sharp pain or so, obviously the responsible thing for us to tell you is go and see a professional. They're going to kind of get it checked out. But I can tell you from experience, it's just kind of figuring out how to work around it. Maybe swap out an exercise if when you do the exercise it gets worse. If you try a lighter weight, it feels okay. That might be what you need to do. Just lower the intensity and just kind of bring it through the range of motion, just to pump enough blood into the area to heal up whatever is potentially has been damaged. And then you'll find that that actually accelerates the healing process because at the end of the day, when whatever injuries you experience, whatever pain you feel, I think one thing should be remembered is that your body will heal. A lot of these pains actually self-resolve. But the issue happens where a lot of times people don't know that the issues will self-resolve because your body is our body has this amazing superpower of actually healing itself if you give it the correct environment to heal and then you give it enough time to heal. So they did this one for like low back paper where they studied all these low back conditions among a huge sample size, and then they find that between different groups, right? One group where they had people, a control group where they had no intervention at all. Another control group where they had some interventions. And then they find that the group with no intervention at 12-week mark, more or less self-resolve, a lot of pain reduced, most of them return back to full function without doing any kind of intervention. So no massage, no special rehab or whatever. They just continue doing their workouts with reduce loads and just like continuing to work out. And the other one, they had some certain interventions, massages, all these stuff here and there, but the reported recovery at the end of the 12 weeks is still the same. So a lot of times what happens is people end up like, okay, I get this thing, I get this injury, I feel this pain, I immediately go and see a professional, and the professional tells me, okay, do all these things. So I start doing all these other random drills and whatever. And then over time, because it self-heals anyway, and these things don't interfere with the healing process, we mistakenly attribute like, oh, I do all these things to improve my my lower back, you know. And the worst part about this, or the reason why I'm even talking about this, is because a lot of times if you go to the wrong practitioner, they might tell you, oh, don't lift heavy anymore. When you shouldn't, when you should actually be looking at how can you continue lifting heavy around this thing? How can you continue putting your body through its paces around this issue? And that's really where like you can tell the difference between a proper practitioner and somebody that's like maybe trying to sell you a modality, you know, like, oh, do more needling with me or do more acupuncture with me or whatever, you know. Yeah. So that's just a quick understanding of that whole pain process. If you experience any pain, number one thing, go and seek a professional advice on this. But how do you assess the professional advice? See what they tell you to do, you know. If they tell you like rest completely, don't do anything, likely you might want to seek a second opinion. You know, go to somebody that tells you how can you work around it, because that person will then know, okay, cool, this is how we work, like the reality of working with injuries and facilitating better recovery from these injuries, even faster recovery potentially from these injuries.
Okay. I
Yeah.
think I pretty much subscribed previously to the, if I injure my let's call it back, as you say,
Yeah.
I would also be the one that actually pulls away from all. And so instead of doing
Mm.
deadlifts, I would only be doing what is it, front, leg extensions and things like that to
Mm.
go and work out rather and hamstring curls rather than
Yeah, but you're
lifting
working
heavy
around
in
it,
that way. And
right? Yeah.
so I also had to shift my mindset slowly. So I still am tentative. So what I do is if I've injured it like that, I would drop my weight that I'm lifting astronomically. So
Yeah.
probably sometimes by like 80, 70 to 80% I drop, so that I'm still going through the motion and I'm
Yeah.
still getting some work to that particular muscle, but I'm not putting it under strain or stress to the degree that I'm aggravating it more. Um, and so I find like doing it that way, and I'm not sure if this would fall under active recovery. I find that
Mm.
I recover from the injury a lot faster than the previous time when I would like move away from the exercise completely. And
Yeah.
it's like I don't do anything when it comes to this particular area anymore for at least 2, 3 weeks. And this
Yeah.
is also dependent on the severity of the injury. Obviously, if the injury is really, really bad, then I would probably advocate a bit more rest. But oftentimes, and probably most times, I find that the injury is not that severe, but it's
Yeah.
just severe enough for you to say, "Oh, what's this? Oh, this is terrible. Oh, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die." But actually, it's not. You get to the actual health professional, and they're like, this is not so bad, you know."
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is like a general injury that people get.
Yeah.
Uh,
I
but
think the benefit of that though for you is that you have a fairly objective way of assessing these things. You know, like you're fairly level-headed in the way that you perceive this, right? Whereas for somebody that's brand new, the moment there's some sort of like weird pain, it might come across as something like there's something wrong. And to be fair, pain is our way of our body telling us, hey, this thing is not part of the usual course of activities, right?
yeah,
But of course, pain tolerance is a different thing as well. Like different people have different pain tolerance. And like I think keeping a level head and assessing it and seeing like, okay, just to what degree is this pain really an issue? You know, because at the end of the day, the reality is that pain is inevitable, right? But the suffering part is not. Suffering is the choice, right? And so if you're going to because if you don't do anything, you're going to end up in more pain also, because you'll be very immobile. Every little thing you're going to do is going to require so much energy. You're going to feel like, you know, everything is so tough to do, and you'll be in all these aches and pains. But if you go and exercise, you also have some aches and pains.
Yep.
You also pick up some aches and pains along the way. You might even pick up, some other injury or so, in the course of this exercise journey that you go about, whether it's related to the exercise or not.
Yeah.
But the reality is that the more you exercise, the more you do all these things, even though there's some discomfort, there's a little bit of pain here and there, your tolerance for it goes up, your ability to bounce back from potential recoveries go up a lot more. And I think I talked about like a perfect example, right? I talked about this one in one of the previous episodes where I think 14 years ago at this point, right? Like I slipped and
Mm.
fell in the toilet and I smashed my lower back against the toilet bowl. Right. So much that it cracked the toilet bowl itself, the ceramic actually had a crack and the whole, toilet cover was like shattered. And I had force-slipped this from that. And my back was in pain for a bit. But being the dumb, stubborn, obstinate, kind of like gym bro meathead guy that I was back in the gym literally like 2 or 3 days later, trying to figure out what can I do. Okay, I can't really deadlift, I can't really load my back, I can't squat. Okay, what machines can I do? Okay, cool, I can do a leg press this way, I can do the leg extension this way, I can do rolls in this for supported way as well. So
Mm.
it's like, like I think what it does and what happens is like that allowed me to bounce back quite quickly from it as well. And all the time that I spent building up my body up to that point of the injury actually protected me from further damage, because the doctor himself asked me how did you get this injury? And I told him like I broke a toilet bowl. I showed him a picture of it. And then he was like, oh wow, I think your back muscles actually save you from what like this could have been a lot worse. Your back muscles actually really save you. So yeah, so at the end of the day, like the pain aspects is something that I think we have to accept it's going to be some degree of discomfort. Should there be like sharp acute pains all the time? Likely no. That means you're probably doing something wrong or something's going wrong. And then get some help to kind of sort that out. But otherwise, if there's a little bit of pain, a little bit of discomfort, some niggling thing here and there in your shoulder, in your elbow, likely it's just a signal for you, as the whole theme of this episode is to kind of back off, recover a little bit more, and give your body just a bit more of that space to deal with what you have been subjecting it to.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think when I one of the other ones is also is like, we touched on it earlier. When you go for a very good squat workout, well, let's just call it a leg workout, but in mine I find it's very prominent with squats. Um, the next day you tend to get that achy feeling in the legs, and your natural inclination is like, okay, I don't really want to move much today. I just want to just stay because this is kind of uncomfortable. And it's like, but I find like the best one is to do when you have that, especially when you know it's targeted. Okay, so I did the squats. I'm feeling the acid burn in my legs, the DOMs. Um, the best I find for myself, what works best, is going for walks. You know,
Mm.
getting some sunlight and going for some walks and just getting that movement going. I find through the active recovery that way, I usually bounce back a lot faster from the DOMs than if I had actually just rested all the time. Well, rested as in lied flat on my back, or just sat in front of the
Yeah.
PC all the time.
Yeah.
And so this is probably also another one of the importance of rest days, but not just purely resting, but what kind of rest and recovery are you doing? And it's touching on what you were sharing about earlier, where you go for the gentle walks or the yoga, the reading, the meditation, all of that
Yeah.
is your choice of recovery. How are you choosing to recover from each of the workouts?
Yeah. Yeah. I think understanding the need for mental recovery and mental recharging is also vital in this case, because as much as you can recharge the physical, if mentally you're not ready to go again, it's hard, it's tough, like your body might be ready to go again, but if you can't push it well, then you're not going to maximize that. So sometimes you do need that mental recovery as well. I guess that's why
Mm.
people take holidays, right? Like the whole point of it is,
Yep,
is to have that recharge as well.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
All right. I think we've covered pretty much everything.
Yeah, I think so. I
I think it
think
was
so.
actually, I think I even learned from this episode. So hopefully those listening actually were able to catch a point or two and they can apply it.
Yeah.
And if they found it useful, would be welcome if you can share it with whoever you find will find this information useful. We also have if you want to contact us, you can head out to to my website, it's 40plusfit.com. By 40, it's not the number, it's spelled out FORTY plus plus.com.
Yeah.
And we also have a lot of the resources on the website as well regarding this kind of issue. Anything you want to add, Twain?
No, I mean, just if you listen this far, thank you so much for sticking around with us, just kind of joining us in the conversation in that sense, right? Being fly on the wall. Yeah, if you could leave a follow or subscribe or whatever it is that the podcast platform asks you to do, that would really help, you know. Yeah. And if there's more questions, already, like right now we're still in early stages, right? And so I think a lot of our stuff, the topics are going to be quite experimental, things that we might want to try talking about, might bring on different people. If there's things that you want us to do, I think now is honestly the best time to kind of request it because we are kind of still in the experimental stage.
Yeah. So we're very open. If there's any particular thing, like you says, anything you're struggling with, anything you've always wondered about, you can always just
Yeah,
drop us a note and we can always do a podcast about it and have
yeah.
another discussion.
Yep, that's it.
With that, I think we call it a day, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Indeed, we will.
All right.
Have a good day. I'll see you in the next one.
All right.
Thanks,
Ciao.
Mike.